plague our world. If you want to revolutionize your health, get truly joyful, and jump to the next phase of human evolution, all it takes is one simple choice. Now, here's your host, Jane Velez Mitchell.
Hello, and welcome to an extraordinary episode. We are bringing you breaking news from across the pond, as they say. We have a guest live in London, England, who has just finished a very, very shocking report. It is called Harvesting Denial, Distractions, and Deception. You know, the vegan food movement is growing globally as people realize it's better for them, the climate, and the animals. But as the word of this lifestyle spreads, there are also powerful forces launching a coordinated campaign to stop the plant-based movement. Big ag, industry, lobbyists, influencers, checkoff programs, politicians, advertiser-based news media, and industry-backed scientists. And at the center of it all, animals who cannot defend themselves. Well, now, the Freedom Food Alliance has a shocking expose called Harvesting Denial, Distractions, and Deceptions. 100 plus pages. That is an absolute shocker. We are under attack. Make no mistake about it. We are under attack. So to bring us this breaking news, we go straight out to London, England, and the amazing Robbie Lockie, who is the CEO of Freedom Food Alliance. So take it away. What is going on? What have you discovered, Robbie, about what the meat industry is doing to try to stop the vegan movement?
Hi, Jane. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to be here. So over the last decade, I've become increasingly concerned about the volume of misleading information that we see on social media, the mainstream media, and of course also outdoor media through advertising. So industry has become increasingly effective at using digital advertising and mainstream media to kind of peddle a specific narrative, or a very kind of mostly a false narrative about plant-based diets, plant-based meats, the vegan lifestyle, vegan activism, and activists themselves. And they're using every trick in the book, really, to try to push back against what is, a global movement of people. Our report, which you very kindly introduced, Harvesting Denial, Distractions, and Deception, is understanding animal agriculture's disinformation strategies, and of course looking at different solutions. And this report is a deep dive that I did, as our foundation report, which we did with the amazing scientist Nicholas Carter. He is the lead author and environmental scientist on this project, currently working for the Game Changers Institute. And his kind of focus with this report was really to expose some of the biggest players in these misinformation, disinformation campaigns, and try to help people understand just how insidious they are and kind of the effect that it has through society in the various ways that this report outlines.
Well, by the way, if you want to read this report, you can just go to freedomfoodalliance.org, and it is a shocker. It's more than 100 pages, but it's got a lot of charts and graphs. And I got to tell you, it really kind of kept me up the whole night because, yes, our food system is 100% broken. Absolutely. This is from the Freedom Food Alliance homepage. 34% of global emissions come from the food and agricultural system. And there are those who say it's much higher than that, much higher. But at the very minimum, then you have $10 trillion, the estimated total of the hidden costs of our food system. The degradation of our soil, which means people aren't getting the nutrients. And perhaps most frightening, the idea that 1 billion people globally may be obese by the year 2030, while other people on the other side of the world are dying of starvation. I mean, this is a completely messed up food system. And we're simply trying to say, hey, fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, and legumes, they're nature's food. People have been eating them since humans roamed the planet, and somehow they've gotten demonized. And they've gotten, it's almost like a bullying campaign. The phrase soy boy is used to target men who eat soy, as if there's anything wrong with soy. In fact, when you eat meat, you're eating compressed soy because more than 80% of all soy produced is fed to farmed animals. So who is behind this campaign in general? You don't have to name specific names, but what are the forces that are behind this campaign to basically stop the plant-based movement in its tracks, Robbie?
It's a really good question, Jane, and they would prefer to remain hidden and obscured from the public. I think what we want to understand is like where the money comes from, and it's obvious it comes from industry. That would make sense. But the way that they conduct their activities are through very clever campaigns and tactics. So let's take something like the Eat Lancet report, which was commissioned by 37 of the world's leading scientists in 16 countries, and this report was seen as, a planetary health diet. And it looked at what people should be consuming, and it made many recommendations really on a global scale, how we should be reducing our meat consumption, and of course increasing our plant-based food consumption. But actually, if you look in the report around page, let's see, what am I on? Page 18 on the report, we look at this kind of explosion of misleading and misinformation on social media at the exact time that the report was released. So it's very clear that industry is watching, studies and scientists that are putting out media that is supportive of the plant-based food system or plant-based nutrition, and then they are coordinating attacks. And there were thousands of tweets with the hashtag yes to meat that went out on Twitter and essentially sort of drowned out this report and tried to discredit it. So ultimately, the focus really is to try to discredit, derail, distract, deny. It's really about creating as much confusion as possible, because when people are confused about what to eat and what to buy, they stick with what they know. They stick with the culture that they grew up in. And most people on Earth today grew up in a culture of meat consumption and animal product consumption. So when they consume media, mostly through social media, and they see these conflicting messages, when they're at the grocery store, what do? They stick with what they know: the milk, the cheese, the meat, the eggs, etc. So that is really what industry does. It tries to create as much confusion as possible, and so people maintain the status quo.
Well, I, first of all, have seen some of these issues that you've mentioned just while I'm looking at the news, and it's pretty frightening. For example, here is a story from last year. The meat industry blocked the IPCC's, which is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, attempt to recommend a plant-based diet. So the United Nations, their Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change wants to say, hey, for the survival of our planet, we need to shift to a plant-based diet. A leaked draft revealed how the meat industry is obstructing efforts to curb climate change. Now, this happened in March of 2023. To me, that's right there. That is clear-cut evidence when the United Nations is trying to issue a report and the meat industry literally gets in there and blocks the publication of their recommendation.
Despite this evidence, the public are still not receiving the message, and that's the point. Industry has so much money to be able to pay for advertising and marketing that they're able to reach millions of people, whereas when there's exposés of this sort, they're published, they go into the media, and maybe a few thousand people might see these articles, and then they kind of disappear. And that's part of the problem. We are just not as loud as them because we don't have that marketing dollar, but we have the potential to be loud as a community, because as a global community there are millions of us. And so it's really important that we educate ourselves on how industry is, on their playbook. How are they, what are their tactics? How do they function? What are the things that they do? What we need to look out for? So reports like this are really vital because it helps people understand how things happen, how things exist in this ecosystem. So I really recommend anyone who's interested in food system change to please read this report and look at some of the aspects of the problem and try to understand it more intimately.
And once again, you can read the entire report. Go to freedomfoodalliance.org and you just put in your email. They send you the report. It was riveting. I literally said, I'm going to read this for 45 minutes and then go to sleep. And I couldn't stop reading it. I read it till like 1:30 in the morning because it's chilling. It's chilling. We've got some callers on the line. Lindsay in Tarzana, your question or thought for Robbie Lockie, who is live in London.
Thank you so much for taking my call. Yes, I'm so grateful to have this information. I want to say that as a person that does content creation on different social media platforms, I am going to read this. I am going to put out the information. And I know, and many, many of us know, that we are much more powerful because there are many, many more of us. And they can put out that information, but we will continue to tell the truth. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Well said, Lindsay. Tiffany in Los Angeles, your question or thought?
Hi, Jane. Thank you for taking my call. And thank you, Robbie, for this information. I wanted to ask you, as vegans, I know we get a lot of snarky comments. And I know recently someone said to me, I'd rather eat a hamburger because at least I know what's in it. Do you have a general response that you use, or because then I find myself going on, I just wish I had a quick response when people make these comments.
Sure.
Do you have something you use? Or?
Absolutely. I get asked this question all the time, and there is, the industry likes to create a comparison between plant-based burgers or vegan burgers and beef burgers. And they like to suggest that plant-based burgers are, in quotes, not natural because they contain a number of ingredients that people might not necessarily be familiar with. And people like to say things like, I don't like to eat things that are full of chemicals. Well, the answer to that is everything is made of chemicals. Our bodies, plants, trees, grass, the ground, everything around us is made of some form of chemical or the other. So it's not about whether things are made of chemicals or not, or whether you can describe the chemical or explain what the chemical is in the food stuff that you're eating. It's about knowing whether the substances in these foods are either healthful or they're harmful. And when it comes to plant-based burgers, many plant-based burgers are actually much healthier than their beef counterparts because they are high in fiber, they're low in saturated fat, they are low in, they're devoid of like things like cholesterol, they don't have antibiotics, hormones, bovine viruses. There are many things in beef burgers that we don't necessarily want in our bodies. But when it comes to plant-based burgers, yes, there might be a list of complex ingredients, but if you want to understand what they're made up of, then it's important to look up those ingredients and try to understand what they are. For example, methyl cellulose. The meat industry has been for many years demonizing this substance, which is a form of plant cellulose. I think it's a synthesized form of plant cellulose. It creates a binding for the plant-based burgers. And the Center for Consumer Freedom, which is an animal ag front group in the United States, created an ad that was played at the Super Bowl that talked about methyl cellulose being a chemical laxative. Now, fiber, if you have too much fiber, what does it do to your body? It can create that effect, but you would need to be eating 20 plus burgers or more to be able to have that effect on your body. So there is a demonization of certain ingredients, primarily just because they sound scientific. But actually, at the end of the day, when you look at like what's in a beef burger, there's a lot of things lurking in that burger that are not good for your health, like the saturated fat, like the antibiotics, potentially, bacteria, salmonella, who knows? There's all kinds of nasties. So I think it's important to try and understand what these foods are made up of and trying to understand the nutritional science behind them. And I know that's a really long answer, and sometimes people don't have the time to understand these things, but I think it's really good to sort of learn about how food is made and where it comes from, no matter whether it's a plant-based burger or a beef burger.
And we've got another caller, and I'd like to go to Christina in Los Angeles. Your question or thought for Robbie Lockie, who, by the way, is one of the founders of Plant-Based News and is now the founder and CEO of the Freedom Food Alliance. Your question. Your question. Yeah.
Oh, hello?
Hello.
Hi there. Great. All right. Sorry about that. Missed that. So, yes, I have a question. This is very specific to this ingredient called carrageenan.
Carrageenan.
It is okay. Thank you. It's a natural thing that's made from sea moss, or it is sea moss.
and the FDA actually has listed as an unhealthy ingredient, and somehow it's linked to some kind of a animal model test that it shows potential links to cancer. So number one, I was a little suspicious of them picking out this ingredient because it is in most vegan foods as a thickener. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to get your take on this because I feel like now this is sort of a long-term plot to eventually negatively impact, vegan food and products, underhanded. And I'd like to hear your feedback on this.
It's a really great question, and I get asked these types of things a lot about these specific ingredients, and it's a little bit like how soy products have been demonized over the decades because there's this idea that soy contains estrogen, but actually soy contains phytoestrogen, which is a completely different molecule. It sounds the same, but it isn't the same as mammalian estrogen. Now, when it comes to carrageenan, which is an extract from seaweed, there are different types of carrageenan, and the carrageenan that's used in food, which is food-grade carrageenan, is safe. It doesn't cause cancer. Now, there are other forms of these highly processed forms of carrageenan which are used in different industries that have been seen to cause some health problems. So I think it's really important to understand the nuance of these ingredients and how they're used, because they're not always the same. You might hear people say things like, my food has too much sodium chloride in it. What exactly is sodium chloride? Well, sodium chloride is, the chemical name for salt. And it's important we understand the depending on how much we have, it can have a detrimental or positive effect on our body. Many people say it's the dose that makes the poison. Something like water that we all need to sustain our lives. If you drink too much water, it can actually kill you. It can dilute the electrolytes in your blood, and it can cause death. So, when it comes to ingredients in food, it is always about volume as well. So if you do some research and you look into the different types of carrageenan, the one referred to, which has been seen to cause issues in some animal studies around cancer, is actually a different type of carrageenan that's used in food. So it's very easy for industry to latch on to these ingredients that are in plant-based products and kind of demonize them. And then when people hear that word, they might Google it and they might see studies associated with a different form of carrageenan. So that's ultimately the issue when it comes to that type of ingredient.
All right, Robbie, you are a wealth of information. I'm very impressed. And you can go to the website, freedomfoodalliance.org, and get a lot of this information. So you have those arguments. Emick in Los Angeles, your question or thought for Robbie Lockie, who is live in London today with us.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for covering this. I was wondering if you are educating people, first of all, eating animals is not natural. Also, the animals they claim natural are all lab-created. Cows, chickens, pigs. Do people know the animals they abuse and eat aren't already natural and full of chemicals and created in labs? Thank you so much. There's no excuse for animal abuse too, of course.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question.
Well, I think what she's saying is that, people don't understand. They say, well, milk is natural. They don't understand that cows are forcibly impregnated against their will by someone, generally a man, sticking his hand up their private parts and inseminating semen. I mean, they think it's nature, but if you actually look at the process, it is violation. I covered crime, human crime, for many years and wrote 2 books about crime. If you had to just define it, it's a rape, abduction, and murder operation. It's all these animals. Nobody's making love on these factory farms. None of these animals, they're all artificially inseminated. Then as soon as the babies are born, the babies are taken away. Yeah. The mother grieves, the baby grieves, and then eventually they're all killed. So that is, what she's saying is people think this is nature, but
right.
Manufacturing 80 plus billion land animals every year and then killing them, that's not nature. It's the opposite of nature.
I think what I like to say is that this is what we call an appeal to nature fallacy. So it's a bit of a blind spot in the way people think about things. Just because something is natural, it doesn't mean it's good for us. It doesn't mean it would benefit us. Snake poison is natural. it will kill you. Many forms of cancer are naturally occurring in the human body, but when left when they get out of control, they can take over our bodies and completely destroy our organs and take our lives. So there's many elements of the world we live in that are natural, but they are quite unsafe. Flying in airplanes, not natural, but we all do it. Wearing clothes might not be seen as natural. Technology is not natural, but it's a part of our lives. So we live in a world where human beings have completely, taken control of the natural world and altered it. And I think that's why we're living longer. We have cleaner food, clean water, we have medicine. All of these things are not natural, but humans have come along and created them. So when people come to us and say, oh, we should be drinking milk because it's natural. Well, I'm sorry, but there's nothing natural about breeding billions of animals into existence, causing widespread suffering and potentially future pandemics. Factory farming is not natural. But in the United States, more than 90% of meat consumed, and dairy too possibly, is factory farmed. It's the very unnatural environments that are causing widespread ecological collapse, and of course the cruelty is on an industrial scale. So I think it's a bit of a blind spot when people have grown up consuming these products, and in their minds they have these romantic views of bucolic fields with cows grazing on the grass, under a beautiful blue sky. Well, that isn't the reality for most animals, especially in the United States. They are concentrated animal feedlots where animals are in these spaces where there isn't a blade of grass, where they live on soy products shipped in from South America, where huge swathes of the Amazon rainforest are being cut down to plant soy to feed these cows. So I think when people come at us and say, well, meat and milk is natural, bring up some pictures of CAFOs, concentrated animal feedlots, and show people how these animals live, and show them the very sad and sorry lives that these animals experience at the hands of industrialized animal agriculture, and of course aquaculture as well.
People can't even look at the photos for 5 seconds because they're so horrific. And I try not to show them too long because people jump off. I mean, it's the quickest way to lose an audience is to show them actually what's happening. And wow, we have our work ahead of us, but let's not downplay our progress, because while I love your report, and I think it's absolutely incredible, you are also, as the co-founder of Plant-Based News, very instrumental in all the successes that we have had globally and how we are growing rapidly as a movement. I want to talk a little bit about the whole idea of vegan burgers specifically being attacked. Recently, Unchained TV interviewed the CEO of Beyond Meat, which when it went public in 2019, I believe was the most successful initial public offering since the 2008 financial crisis. And as a result, I think many would agree that it panicked the meat industry, and they came after Beyond Meat. And it was almost like target number one. Mm-hmm. So this is what Ethan Brown, the CEO of Beyond Meat, told me just the other day about how he is responding to those attacks. I have it here somewhere. Give me 1 second, because what his attitude is we don't have to. I'll have to come back to that sound. We don't have to fight back as much as just say, okay, we're going to make a better product. We're going to turn around and make a really good vegan burger. They've just come up with a new vegan burger that has something like 70% less saturated fat because it's using avocado oil.
Yeah. Innovation is essential when it comes to competition, whether we're being, attacked by another industry or not. I think plant-based products, specifically things like burgers, were reaching a lot of people, and consumers were really going for them and using them as an alternative to meat-based products, because there's a lot of conversation in the media about how meat is damaging the environment, and if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, you need to eat less meat. So things like Impossible Burger, Beyond Burger, we have many different brands and options in the UK. There was huge success, and we saw a massive burst in demand. But then there was a point where in the last 3 to 4 years we've seen this huge decline. Obviously we've had COVID, and we've got economic downturn, and that is going to affect the buying power of the consumer. There's also the issue of price parity, and that's one of the biggest things that I think a lot of people do not speak about. Meat is heavily subsidized by governments across the planet. So it makes the meat much more affordable and much more attractive for consumers. Not everyone is a vegan and not everyone wants to live the ethical lifestyle. People are just sometimes concerned with price, taste, and availability. And that for them is, three of the most important things. And if you go to the supermarket and you want to buy a pack of, say, vegan bacon, you could go and buy a pack of pork bacon, and in the UK it's £6 per kilogram, and the vegan bacon is £29 per kilogram. So the difference is vast as far as price parity. So that is a big problem because of economies of scale. But then you add misinformation on top of that, which is a major problem. That erodes consumer confidence in these products. So when you go to the grocery store and you reach out for your Beyond Burger, maybe you've seen an ad that says Beyond Burgers contain methylcellulose, a form of chemical laxative. And that creates distrust. And that has been incredibly effective. Over the last 4 to 5 years, industry has been essentially drowning out our message as a movement using various tactics, whether it's advertising campaigns, radio ads, Super Bowl ads that reach millions of people, online campaigns, paying influencers thousands of dollars to share videos or to talk about these health dangers of plant-based burgers. So they are really throwing everything but the kitchen sink at us to try to disrupt the plant-based food industries. But we have the truth on our side. We have the science and nutritional data on our side, and we really can't give up.
We cannot give up. And that was so well said. I want to also show this. And part of the problem is media. I was in mainstream media for, more than 30 years. And I saw firsthand that they just do not cover, particularly advertiser-based television news media. They don't cover our movement at all. So the New York Times put this out last year: Save the planet, put down that hamburger. Researchers examined the diets of 55,500 people and found that vegans are responsible for 75% less in greenhouse gases than meat eaters. And then, as the article proceeds, it said the same thing, a different way. They said, if a heavy meat eater goes plant-based, and most Americans are heavy meat eaters, they can reduce their greenhouse gas emissions footprint by 75%. I thought, even me, cynical, jaded me, thought, they've got to mention this on some of the networks. They've got to, because that's the solution. If we all went vegan, we could all collectively reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 75%. Well, not a peep on CNN or any of these other networks, MSNBC. What do you make of that? I mean, literally looking at the solution and choosing not to cover it, while at the same time doing what I call catastrophe porn. People dying in the floods here and there, the climate change, the catastrophe, look, these fires, these floods. Isn't it terrible? Isn't it terrible? Then a solution is published, not in some crazy tabloid, but in the New York Times, and nobody picks up on it. What do you say to that?
I'm going to say what you've said in the past: follow the money. Industry has its fingers in every aspect of our society. The food industry is incredibly powerful, and the people who own the food industry are often people who work in media, who have connections to government. Here in the UK, we have something called the Eat Balanced campaign. It is a £5 million, that's like an $8 million campaign. It's run every year. It's an always-on campaign. And there was a national food study that recommended that we reduce our meat consumption by 30%. It was recently exposed that there were politicians involved who own farms, who essentially, in a way, played a role in kind of pushing aside these studies and this information. So it's really all about the people who are colluding with government and industry to push these messages out of the public view. And that's ultimately what's happening. We now have enough information, and we know without a shadow of a doubt that if we switch to a more plant-focused food system, we will dramatically reduce our emissions. And of course, that also adds up to other things like reduction in deforestation, reduction in river acidification, ocean dead zones, you name it. There's a list as long as my arm of benefits that would happen to our natural world if we stopped farming animals, or at least reduced it dramatically. But of course, industry is so powerful, it has so much money behind it, that the kind of commercial incentive and imperative of industry is to keep going no matter what. And I think a lot of people who are at the tops of a lot of these companies, personally, I don't know how they sleep at night, but at the end of the day, it is all fueled by greed and power and the ability to really, continue to, pour huge amounts of financial gain from selling animal products.
Well, I found the clip of Ethan Brown, the CEO of Beyond Meat, pretty much I could say one of the top targets by Animal Ag because it was so successful, its initial public offering, and has been so successful. Let's listen to what he had to say in response to the attacks.
What do we want to do? We're going to allow iron to sharpen iron. I love that phrase that the fiercest winds make the strongest branches. If you're under attack, you can you can sort of complain about it, or you can just get to work. And we decide we're going to get to work. We have an unassailable argument in terms of, climate and animal welfare and natural resources, all the efficiencies. But if they're going to attack health, we're just going to become healthier. And so what we decided to do was start to renovate our core portfolio. And the Beyond 4 represents over 3 years of work to create the next iteration of Beyond Meat. And we brought in doctors and nutritionists and registered dietitians to help us craft a burger that not only tastes even better than the Beyond 3, but delivers really strong health benefits. And that includes, we dropped the saturated fat by 60%, but we also importantly swapped out the coconut oil for avocado oil. And so avocado oil is a very heart healthy oil. And so what we're allowing consumers to do now is they can really enjoy this. I eat, multiple burgers when I sit down, right? Because there's no concern, right? It has only 2 grams of saturated fat, which is not a lot in terms of your daily limit. We also brought the sodium levels down, right? So we wanted to make it unassailable. And you know what? We're going to keep going. We're going to keep making it better. But the important thing to consider is now it's been certified by the American Heart Association in recipes. Right? It has been certified by the American Diabetes Association. It's been certified by the Clean Label Project.
So that is a very specific response. He even says it right at the start. Hey, we just made our product even healthier. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is that's fantastic. I think it's been a real blind spot for the vegan food sector, the health aspect of it. Because, a lot of these products, let's be honest, burgers are not health products. These foods were never made to be healthy. They are what we call junk food. They are processed food. But, if we can make them healthier, we can reduce their salt, oil, and sugar. It's going to create a healthier product. Because when people say, is this vegan burger healthy? And I'll often say, compared to what? Compared to a bean burger or compared to a beef burger? If comparing it to a beef burger, it is absolutely healthy. As Ethan said, lower saturated fats, obviously high in fiber, many benefits to this product. If you compare it to a bean burger, no, it's not as healthy. A bean burger has no saturated fat. It's got a lot more fiber. It is probably better for you. But we want the consumer to be able to have good choices when it comes to plant-based products, and we want plant-based companies to innovate. So I think it's a huge step in the right direction.
I agree. I was so impressed by his attitude. And, just to put it in context, because I've been vegan about 28 years. And of course, when our movement first took off, it was just health food. And then people started saying, but I could never give up. And then mentioning different things they could never give up. So people started developing vegan versions of those things that they could never give up. I could never give up my burger. I could never give up my cheese. I could never give up my milkshake. I could never give up my ice cream. So now there are all those things in vegan versions. And then they turn around and they say, well, those are not as healthy as you guys say you're healthy. Well, wait a second. There were always fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, and legumes there. But the response to those vegetables that nature has given us since time immemorial was, no, I don't want to have that. So we created all these foods so that you could have your comfort foods. Then they turn around and attack you and say, well, it's not as healthy as whole food plant-based. So, they're trying to put us in a no-win situation. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
They're moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts constantly, and it's a game of cat and mouse. That's ultimately what we're experiencing right now. But we have got to continue with creativity, innovation, and education. Education is a core part of this whole conversation. A more informed consumer is a consumer that makes better food choices. Let's be clear: when we spend any time in our childhood growing up, as far as what we're taught about nutrition is minimal. And this is why, doctors and, people around us who we look to for nutritional advice are often peddling false information or misinformation, because they get their knowledge from the same places we all do: the media, television, popular culture, newspapers, etc. And it can be tainted with industry agendas. And so that's why it's really important for platforms like our platform, the Freedom Food Alliance, and our new website, foodfacts.org, which we'll be launching in the next few months, as a go-to place for agenda-free nutritional information. We want people to feel that they can trust the information, the scientific nutritional information that they're receiving, which is evolving all the time. And it's important that we are honest about that. We have veganism, which is an ethical stance, a philosophy that looks to exclude animals from diet, entertainment, fashion, etc. And there's really a point of morality. But then you have nutritional science, and the data and the studies show today that a whole food plant-based diet, rich in legumes, pulses, nuts and seeds, and fruits and vegetables, this is one of the healthiest diets for people to eat if you want to reduce your lifestyle diseases and live a long and healthy and vital life.
All right, we've got Michelle in Los Angeles. Your question or thought in Los Angeles, but Robbie is live from London, England.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Robbie, I love that you have these organizations, because I have a lot of friends that I've talked to, and they don't like me bringing up the whole vegan thing, but they keep quoting science, like the science is not behind this or that. I want to know what you think about what's going on in the U.S. with the bird flu. I've been trying to talk to different friends and family members and acquaintances about this, and they don't seem to get it. The third person has now been reported in Michigan with the bird flu, and no one seems to make that connection between the birds, the cows, the dairy, the meat industry. What are some tactics or some reasonings you can give?
Thank you for that question. 3 out of 4 infectious diseases came from animals. And I think that's what we need to remember, that a lot of these pandemics that have spread across the planet have come from how we farm and treat animals. Viruses love to multiply. And when we put huge amounts of animals or humans together in a place where they cannot socially distance, viruses can jump from one creature to another, creating a runaway kind of a shift in that kind of the makeup of that virus, causing it to mutate over time, potentially making it a higher threat to different organisms, and also jumping from organism to another organism. So in the case of COVID-19, as the current historical record goes, there was a virus that jumped from a bat to a pangolin, I believe, and that was what created a new novel virus that then was infected human beings. So when we are continuing to farm animals in a way where there are tens of thousands of animals tightly packed on top of each other, what we're doing is playing a game of Russian roulette. We are essentially quickening the chances of a future pandemic coming into our society. It's so important to understand that, yes, people might want to eat meat, but it is going to come at a huge cost to the future of our society. Because let's be honest, it's not a case of are we going to have a future pandemic, but more of when are we going to have one? Because factory farming is showing no signs of slowing down. We're seeing more and more concentrated animal food lots opening up across the United States and other parts of Asia with their super mega dairies. In China, they're building these giant multi-floor dairies with cows packed into these very small spaces, and also with pigs as well. It's absolutely abhorrent, but it's very short-sighted, because what it is doing really is like loading a bullet into a gun that could annihilate our entire species. And I'm trying not to be hyperbolic here, but I really believe that if we continue farming animals in this way, there is no future for human beings on this planet.
And I agree with you. In fact, I did a documentary called Countdown to Year Zero, which posits that we only have this decade to get our act together because, and this is not just me saying it, Sir David Attenborough has a great documentary called Breaking Boundaries. There's only about 9 of them, and we're crashing through them. And once the ice caps are gone, for example, there's no returning. Once the Amazon's gone, there's no way to return it in a lifetime or 2 or 3. So yeah, we're barreling toward a very, very scary place. And of course, when we see the extreme weather phenomenon, people are just crying and we're victims, but actually they are participants. They are participants. They are not victims if they're engaging in this food. Now, the World Bank recently, just the other day, basically said we need to shift to alternative proteins. They called for governments around the world to stop subsidizing meat and dairy, in so many words, and start backing alternative proteins. Again, another story that was completely ignored, as far as I could tell, by mainstream media. I Googled it. What came up was the World Bank itself. Changes in farm and food production can cut greenhouse emissions by 1/3. Another obscure publication said World Bank tiptoes into fiery debate over meat emissions. And the Green Queen sort of said it more flat out. World Bank bats for alternative proteins, calls for shift away from meat and dairy subsidies. Where the mainstream media was in this, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, I did not see any reference to this. This is a bank that invests billions of dollars around the world issuing a call. And even the World Bank, what scared me the most was that if the World Bank can't get this out, I mean, that's a very powerful institution.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the Plant-Based Treaty comes in, which is an international movement which has had over 151,000 people sign and endorse it, over 1,400 organizations, almost 2,000 businesses, and over 30 cities around the world who've endorsed this. And the idea behind the Plant-Based Treaty is that a 3-step process. We need to relinquish, so no new land use for animal agriculture, deforestation. We need to, number 2, redirect and actively transition away from an animal food system to a plant-based food system. And number 3, we must also actively restore key ecosystems by restoring forests and rewilding our landscape. So we have and this was based on the fossil fuel treaty. So we have a real clear plan here on how we can repair the planet. And nature has a wonderful ability to be able to restore itself if we just leave it alone. And I think this is what we need to do. We need to get organized. We need to mass mobilize. It's important that as many people who feel compelled or passionate about creating a better world for animals and people alike, we have got to join these organizations, become part of them, get out there, leaflet, speak to your politicians, speak to your local councils, and demand change. We have to do it. The more people who join this conversation, the greater the chance we have of getting this message through to people who really hold the keys of power, essentially.
Well, on a positive note, I think we really need to step back and look at our movement, not from a 2-year perspective, but from, let's say, a 20-year, let's do 28 years. I've been vegan about 28 years. When I first went vegan, there were a couple of vegan restaurants. I'd walk in, they were empty. I knew everybody because it was just me and the maitre d' and the chef. But now it's very hard to get a table sometimes at some of these hot restaurants, 11 Madison Park, Planta, all sorts of restaurants are popping up that are so popular. I don't want to insult anybody by leaving any out. Pura Vida, fantastic Italian restaurant here in Los Angeles. It's several of them. The food is so spectacular. So on a 20-year scale, where now we have all these products. And by the way, a lot of the products are getting bought up by big companies, like Silk Soy Milk has sold to a big company. You have Tofurky. You have all of these companies that are successful being acquired by mainstream companies. I guess the ultimate example would be Kraft Foods. It puts out Boca Burgers, So to put it in perspective, it's we have come a long way, Robbie.
We have. I think, but we're not going to eat our, well, I don't think we're going to eat our way out of this problem. We don't need more vegan burgers and vegan chicken and stuff like that. What we need is a change in culture. We live, as Dr. Melanie Joy talks about, is a carnistic culture, which teaches us from childhood, most of us, that eating animals is normal, natural, and necessary, that we have to do it. And that really feeds every aspect of most of our decision making as humans on this planet. We have created a culture around us that makes it feel that we are entitled to consume animals, and that if we don't, we are looked down upon, because actually, meat consumption is seen for most parts of the world as and associated with upward mobility, with being wealthy and having money and having the luxury to be able to consume meat. And actually, the consumption of plants and just vegetables was often continues to be looked down upon as something of poverty or people of lower classes. So we have a culture problem that's part of this, and I think this is where more work needs to be done. We need to be looking at changing the culture of our food system, not just what we're eating, but why we choose to eat what we eat.
Well, and you mentioned that, but by the same token, talk about you can't win for trying. Then there's also accusations that veganism is an elitist movement and that only wealthy people can afford to eat certain products. And sure, there's a chai turmeric tea that's $30 and might be out of a lot of people's price range. But let me tell you, you go to the supermarket, you get a sack of potatoes, a bag of brown rice, and a bag of black beans, and you can live for a month on very little money. So it really depends on what vegan food you eat. But again, this is an example of people trying to have it both ways. Oh, it's so expensive. Well, no, you could eat a sack of brown rice, black beans, and a whole bunch of kale, and it would be a superfood and you'd be super healthy, but you're not choosing to eat that. It's always been available. And so then you turn around and say, well, some of these restaurants are very high priced. When people don't want to hear something, they can come up with a million excuses. And this is the typical behavior of an addict. You rationalize, you minimize, you excuse yourself, and any excuse. It's a sunny day, let's drink. It's a rainy day, let's drink. I lost my job, let's drink. I got a promotion, let's drink. It's the same thing with meat and dairy, and it's the hallmark of addiction. So are we dealing with addicts?
I don't think we are dealing with addicts. I think it can feel like an addiction, but if you compare it to something like heroin or cocaine or any of these other heavy drugs, alcohol, eating meat, it doesn't have the same effect as these heavy drugs. I think it goes back to a culture. We have a deeply ingrained culture, a carnistic culture, that teaches us that eating animals is normal, natural, and necessary, and even sometimes nice. People love the taste of meat. It's high in fats and proteins that our brains kind of are drawn to because of our evolutionary our existence through evolution. Human beings for most of our history have had to struggle to get enough calories, and when we started eating animals, it was a way for us to survive. But we've kept that with us, and of course, in industry and giant corporations, they know that these products feel good when people eat them. So I would be cautious in talking about it in a way of addiction, because I think you don't have withdrawal symptoms when you don't eat meat. I think you have pleasure when you eat meat, and this is where things like cellular agriculture and precision fermentation, these new innovations, which are obviously also heavily being attacked, especially in the United States, with various politicians deeming them to be, making them illegal. We do have solutions, but I think at the core of all of this is a culture where humans, for the most part, feel that they have to eat meat to be healthy and survive. But also the plant-based products, like the burgers and the meats and the steaks, they aren't quite as realistic. I mean, I have not eaten meat for over 12 years, and when I eat, say, a product like redefined meat, for me, this tastes like the real thing. But when you give it to a person who has eaten meat their whole lives and they're just trying this for the first time, they say, oh, that's not chicken. Why do you call it chicken? It doesn't taste like chicken. So I think once these products become even better, and the mouthfeel and the texture and the satisfaction that people get from eating these products improves, I think that we will, and we obviously win over the argument about health, I feel like we will make huge leaps forward. But we're still in a place now where the food industry, or the meat industry specifically, is attacking plant-based products, calling them unnatural, calling them unhealthy, saying they've got too many ingredients. And of course, the consumer is buying all of this. So again, not to bang the drum of education, I think as advocates, it's important that we're out there fact-checking, debunking, and really kind of, doing everything we can to make sure that the correct nutritional science is reaching the right people. And yes, we can live on brown rice and black beans and tempeh and tofu and potatoes, and these are all very healthy foods. But unfortunately, we live in a society now where junk food is everywhere, and it's very hard to avoid it.
Well, yeah, and on your website, you say that, I'll pull it up again, right here, 1 billion people may be obese by the year 2030, Robbie.
Yeah, it's shocking. But that's because of the way that we're eating. I think the excess, the food waste, we're living in a capitalist, many people live in a capitalist society where there is just too much food of all sorts, and there's so much food waste, and people have access to cheap food because of industrialization and automation of the food system, which has, of course, turned animals into objects, and the sanctity of life is completely non-existent when it comes to the consumption of animals. And I think that lack of respect for the natural world is becoming increasingly problematic. It's a bit like living in a neighborhood, excuse me, where got a very dry throat, sorry. When you live in a neighborhood where you care about your local habitat, you're going to see people planting trees and planting flowers and caring about the space they live in. But I think, we are living in a time where people are becoming increasingly disillusioned with the future. We've got widespread environmental collapse. We've got wars going on all over the place. People feel a little hopeless. And I think it's important that despite all this destruction and all the bad things happening in the world, we do focus on the good. There are so many good people in this world. There are so many incredible initiatives and programs trying to reverse the damage that we've done over the last one century. And I think follow pages like Sam Bentley on Instagram. He's a really good friend of mine, and there are many people like Sam who are out there sharing this good news and spreading a little hope and light. And I think we really need to focus on that.
Well, you mentioned capitalism. I actually call it corporate socialism. If you take a look at this, even while the government purports to want to solve climate change, and animal agriculture is, everybody agrees, a leading cause. Some have made the argument that it is the leading cause. It depends on how you calculate it. But the USDA, for example, continues to pump. This is just one example. I get these all the time. More than $43 million investment in meat and poultry processing research, expansion, and innovation. So that's not capitalism in my book. I go to a veg fest and I see couples, a husband and wife team, or a brother and sister making vegan products that they're putting out there. That's mom and pop capitalism. What we're talking about is corporate socialism, where literally the government is working hand in hand with major corporations to push meat and dairy. The United States Department of Agriculture is run by a dairy industry trade group leader. Yeah. And this is the second time he's served. So how do we expect a dairy industry trade group leader to respond to the fact that the National Institutes of Health itself says 67% of the population experiences lactose malabsorption, which is a fancy way of saying most of us are allergic to dairy products?
I don't even know where to begin with all of that. It can be a little overwhelming when we turn to our governments and the people who lead our countries for the solutions, and they are colluding with industry in ways that are quickening the demise of our society. So it can be hard to have to face this and confront this. I think it's about getting active. We have to get out there and get active, whether it's politically or whether it is through environmentalism. I think we need more people to join this conversation. Mass mobilization is the key to solving this problem. There are not enough advocates in the world working on these issues. Of all the vegans in the world, I think less than 0.5% are advocates who are actually actively working in these spaces, helping to improve environmental protection, animal protection, advocating for plant-based nutrition. This has got to be where we need to focus. It's not enough just to eat a plant-based diet or be vegan. It's important to get active and get out there and spread this message in the most positive and correct way.
Absolutely. And on that note, first of all, I'm so excited to have you on for the hour. I am a huge fan. I love what you say, how you say it. And I absolutely want everybody to download this report. Go to the freedomfoodalliance.org, freedomfoodalliance.org. Sign up, get involved. And this is just the beginning. This is a relatively new organization. So it's growing fast and everybody can be a part of it. So the first step is to go to freedomfoodalliance.org and sign up. And I also want to urge everybody to please talk about reaching the general public. With 8.1 billion humans on the planet, we can't hope to talk to them all individually, which is why I started Unchained TV, the world's only vegan streaming television network. And it's absolutely free to watch. I urge everybody watching, at the very least, download it. You can download it on your phone. You can download it on any television. It's there in London, too. It's all over the world, except for China and North Korea. And you can watch it on your via Amazon Fire Stick, Roku device, Apple TV device. And if you have a Samsung TV, which I have behind me, it's on every Samsung TV. You just go to the Smart Hub and you download it. And there it is. It's right behind me. So I will just show you where it is as we wrap up. This has been a very exciting conversation. I agree, Robbie. Those who are watching who are already vegan, get involved. Yes, it's fun. It's a social club, but it's got to be more than that. We are running out of time. I have a Samsung TV behind me. There is Unchained TV right there. So you can watch this episode on Unchained TV and 68 or 70 more of our conversations. Thank you so much for joining us. Robbie Lockie from London, England. So excited to have you. Thank you so much. Next time.